Good morning. Welcome to Moshiach Matters, class number 130. That's what I think we're holding. Maybe we're off by one, something like that. Thank you. Okay, this is really exciting. We are holding in Parshas Toldos, and the class that we are holding by, the Parsha, it's a big mazel tov this week, because we're actually moving into the next pasuk. In pasuk Chavav, I think we've given it like 12, maybe 15 classes. So it's exciting. Maybe less. I don't know. It has to be at least 10. So it's exciting to move on to the next pasuk. And let's see. Parshas Toldos is a very rich Moshiach parsha. Anyways, on the pasuk, Vayigdalu ana Arim, the youths, the youngsters, Yaakov and Esav grew up. And Esav was a man who knew how to hunt. Ish Sadeh, a man of the field. Yaakov Ish Tam, and Yaakov is a wholesome person. Yoshev Ahalim, who dwells in the tents. So the pasuk is describing, till now we had the two boys. Rashi says when they were young, we couldn't really differentiate and to know who they are, what they're like. When they grew older, you can already start seeing which each one is gravitating to. Esav was a man who knew how to hunt. He was a hunter. He was a man of the field. That means he ditched class. That's what he was. He couldn't sit in his studies. He was all over the place, roaming the fields, having a good time. And Yaakov was a wholesome man, is an ishtam, a complete wholesome person. Tam also means very sincere and very, very straight. And Yoshev Ahalim, whose passion and pleasure and entire excitement was to sit in the study halls and study and learn. Okay, so obviously two twins, but as different as they can be. Okay, so I'd like to share today a couple of ideas on Esav's character, who's a Yodea Tzayid. We begin with Esav, because the Torah begins with Esav. Find the Moshiach connection over here. So first we have to get a good sense of Esav himself. And because let's understand something, Moshiach is very related to Esav, because it's the purification of Esav that brings us to the Messianic era. So I'd like to start with a Rabbeinu Bechaya. The truth is there's a medrash that he brings over here, which maybe I wasn't going to say, but there's something in me that's pushing me to say the medrash. So let's not leave that out. It's a medrash. It's a medrash Perek Samach Gimel. It says on Esav that he was a man who was a Yodea Tzayid, Ish Sadeh. Reb Chia Amar, Reb Chia says, Hifker Atzmai Kesadeh. He abandoned himself like a field, that anybody can come and can plant in the field. A field is an open place, and anybody can come and plant seeds in the field. Basically, the Medrash says that Esav was someone who allowed himself, he was a very promiscuous person. So besides the fact that we find him cheating on women and taking women and doing all sorts of things, the Medrash also saying that Esav was a person who, in regards, had made himself available to anybody that was looking to have. It's a strange Medrash, but the Medrash says he was like a field. A field is usually referred to as a feminine aspect, because it's a recipient of a planting, and therefore a holy field, Chakal Tapuch and Kadishin, is referring to the attribute of Malchus, that receives all the light from God, and from there it produces the holy production. So that refers to a woman who's faithful to her husband and creates holy children that have purpose and mission in their life, and so on and so forth. That's usually the idea of a field. When there's the unholy field, is usually the element of the woman who's open to all. But the strange thing is, the Medrash is saying that Esav made himself open to everyone. Physically, he was engaged in relationships, in homosexual relationship, and so forth. That's what it says about Esav. So it says the Jewish people said before Hashem, Am Yisroel Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rebbein Kol Olam, Master of the world. Lo Yidayenu Shenishtabdu L'Shivim Umois. It's not enough that we have become enslaved to every single one of the 70 nations. But even to someone, we've now become enslaved to a nation, to Esav, who turned himself into a woman. So the Medrash says, God answers him, I'm going to punish him in that way. And he brings from Yirmiyahu, the strong men of Moab on that day are going to be like the heart of a woman in her troubles. That means that the powerful people of Moab are going to fall and are going to be like weak in the sense, meaning that here they are, the great warriors of Moab. Now, even though Moab is not Edom, Moab is from the descendants of Lot, this is not Esav, yet the Mefarshim talk about it, even though the Pasuk speaks about Moab, it refers to Esav as well. And they're going to be weak, they're going to lose all their power, meek and weak. So I think there's something to it. You're finding that the fall and the demise of Edom, the fall of the entire European Western world, is going to be related to the fact that they lose their masculinity and they become like women. In general, we know that Moshiach's world is a very feminine world, but in holiness, the feminine power can rise, but it doesn't mean that the masculine is going to lose its masculinity. But in the world of Esav, it's going to reach a point where it's going to become such a distortion. You're seeing that in Europe, we're seeing that an attempt in America too, to take away, for men to stop being men. And that it says is a punishment for Esav from the very, very beginning of him behaving in that manner, like a woman. And when he loses his sense of identity of who he is and what he is, then his future is going to be a complete breakdown. See, when you break down the morals of what God set up, you break down the basic infrastructure that takes to have a nation, that takes to have a people, that takes to have a country. And the whole, everything gets confused, and you basically end up with a very, very confused society. And I don't know why it's coming to my head. I don't know, well, maybe I heard this once. I don't know. Some author who wrote a lot about this idea of how there's a certain loss of masculinity even here in America regarding to young men not growing up with what it takes to be a man, and it has all to do with the breakage in the moral world. So it's just to be on the record that there is a medrash that predicts the fall of Esav falling. In other words, his collapse is related to this what do we call it? Deficiency in masculinity. Okay. Again, I don't have more to say about that. I just wanted to point it out. Regarding to the general nature of Esav, so there is a very interesting Rabbeinu Bechaya, and I'd like to build this up from Rabbeinu Bechaya in the realm of Pshat to Rabbi Yonis and Eibshitz in the realm of Drush, and finally to the Chassidus, the Tzemach Tzedek in the realm of Pnimiyas HaTorah, as we can see how one builds on the other, and then we'll actually see its connection to Moshiach. So regarding to Esav, he brings Rabbeinu Bechaya, that even though they're twins, we can see that their nature are Shnei Afechim, they're totally opposite. And all their midos are different one from each other. It's because Esav is a very earthy, physical person, is drawn after the pleasures of the body. By him, the body reigns supreme. Yaakov is the one who's drawn after the counsel of his soul. So Yaakov is a soul, a person dedicated to the pursuits of the soul, higher spiritual aspirations. Esav is a true hedonistic materialist. And that's why it says about Esav, he says, Vayi Esav ish yedei tzayid. He says, tzayid is a person who doesn't have what to do with his time. A hunter is someone, a person who has a purpose, a higher calling in life, doesn't end up hunting. The reason is because you're obsessed. Read a book, learn something. You need to do some exercise. Go out for a walk. Marvel at the beauty of God's creation. Jog. To go out and to hunt, which is an idea of someone who has a certain distortion and whose life is very materialistic. And he says, Ish Sadat, that's the idea of Ish Tzayed. It's an empty human being who has to find himself such fascinations for sport, of killing innocent animals. I'm saying if you're hunting because you want the meat, it's one thing, but to just a hunt as a sport, it is indicative of an empty human being. The other thing, it says Ish Sadat is a man of the field. And the man of the field means he's a man of earth. That's one of the reasons why he's called Edom. Edom is referring to redness, he says. But Edom is also coming from the word Adama, which is earth. He's an earthy man. That's who he is. Now, he says it is known that when a person becomes an earthy person, that means that your pleasure is in the material, in the world of eating or drinking, and finding pleasure in the physical sport of hunting and the like. So that brings a person to find that it becomes very cheap in a person's eyes serving God. Serving Hashem and fearing God becomes not only something that you're not involved with, but it's something that you look down at and scoff at. Because your sense of value and appreciation becomes only physical good times. And obviously, a person doesn't say this explicitly, but why do you cheapen? What do you scoff? Because deep inside, a person knows the lack of permanence and lack of truth to the material things of the world. They all decay, and they all only give us a temporary sensation, a very momentary sensation. So deep inside, a person recognizes their insignificance. And when you see, therefore, when you see and you watch people that are actually connecting in their lives to something more meaningful, to something permanent, it causes a certain emptiness and a pain. And that's why, but because, you feel that you can't tear yourself away from this momentary, enticing physical pleasure of the moment, so you have to laugh. You have to laugh at someone and scoff and look, what are you laughing? Oh, you're involved in things that don't exist. What does a materialist say about a spiritual person? Spirituality doesn't exist. It's like, what is it? You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it. It's a make-believe thing. The reason I have to laugh at it is because it's contradicting the person's whose life is all about the material. And he says, but the interesting thing he says, it's a sad truth, is that, and we all have struggled with this. Even if we see ourselves as spiritual people, we all have our ups and downs. Sometimes our more earthy Esav side gets the better over us, and we get lost in it, hopefully only for a short period of time. But anyways, he says, people that live with in this state, where the material world is all their pleasure and all their life, we find that they will end up feeling tremendously cheated. Like you see, Esav himself speaks in the end. He says, "I was tricked." He cries out about Yaakov, "You tricked me." In other words, that's what a life like this will ultimately always leave a person feeling cheated at the end, because the pleasure and the delight that one gets from these things are very, very temporal, and they ultimately come to an end. And he says, that's why you find that by Esav, that in the end, the last story almost the Torah tells about him is how Esav cries out, the last, but one of the later stories. Torah says about Esav, "Vayitzak tza'aka gedola umara." He cries out, Esav, a bitter cry. That's the life of a person who wasted his energies on the material world. You find so many people that sadly have everything they want in the material world. They have fame, they have money, they have recognition. And sadly, we find that they take their lives. They overdose on drugs and different things, various different substances. They can't quench the pain that they have. It's an emptiness, because the physical never comes through on what it promises. Its promises, it's it's overrated. You know, it gets you because at the moment of pleasure, like you feel like this is it, this is life. But when you realize that you wasted your life pursuing things that don't have anything, like when a person is 90 years old, like what does he have from the memory of a good sandwich that he had when he was 20 years old and he was able to eat, 20 hot dogs at a contest? But what does he have from the memory of the pleasure he had when he had this, some kind of a non-kosher relationship with a woman or something? So what does he have? The memory? Is that something that's giving him satisfaction and pleasure, that he had beautiful girls or whatever it was that he had? I mean, it's exciting on the moment. It's something that one can brag around to his friends if he needs to brag. But when you're coming of age and you're looking back at a life, that's not what's going to give you pleasure. If you feel that you built something in this world to help people, if you think that you made a scientific discovery, you contributed, you have a Nobel prize for a contribution that you've made that is helping humanity, that is guiding, that is making the world a better place. Wisdom, knowledge, these are things that leave a person with a deep, deep inner satisfaction. That's what Rabbeinu Bachaya says. It says at the end of a person's life in that has made the material world all their life is a sense of a yakfenu zepamayim. I've been ripped off. It's very, 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 very important teaching. It's usually not the Chassidic class that I usually give, but it's just so sobering that the Rabbeinu Bachaya just lays it out in a very simple way. He says the ways of Yaakov Avinu are the opposite. He was a man, he was an ishtam, he was a wholehearted person, and he was the total opposite of a hunter. And he says Yoshev Aholim, he sits in the tents, is the opposite. He's a man of the book, is the opposite of being a man of the field. And he says an amazing, he says, this that Esav wanted to buy, Yaakov wanted to sell. And what is that? That's the pot of lentil soup. It's a pot of lentil soup. He says the pot of lentil soup means much more than just that pot. A good pot of cholent or yapsik or whatever. Whatever the delight, whatever the culinary, or we might say gourmet experience. It represents all the pleasure of the physical world. That's why it's lentils. Lentils are round. Because the physical world is a world that's round in the sense that you have it, you have a high, and then you drop down low again. That's what it is. It's a cycle, up and down and up and down. As he said, there's no permanence. And Yaakov didn't want that. Yaakov sold the lentil soup. He sold that entire world of pleasure that he shouldn't have to occupy himself. That's not meaningful to him. He wants to invest his energies into a meaningful relationship, into a relationship connecting to God, into something that's lasting, and what did he buy? He sold the lentils for the firstborn right. And what's the firstborn right? To be the one who's going to officiate and serve in the Holy Temple. That means to be a servant of the Eibishter. That's the Rabbeinu Bachaya's take on the difference between Yaakov and Esav described. Such short description of the Torah, but it has all this depth and all this meaning. Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, great scholar, also a Kabbalist, but he wrote a lot in the style of Drush. So in his Sefer Yare's Davash, so he writes an amazing thing. He says that it's known that Esav's world is this physical world, the material world, and Yaakov's world is really the spiritual world of the future. The world filled with godly delight, which is a true Yom Shekulo Tov, MS is true. So he asks the question, how come we find that Yaakov is so downtrodden in this material world? I mean, Baruch Hashem, I'm not going to ask questions. I'm going to be very happy and thank Hashem for this, that God has given the Jewish people the last century, at least after the Holocaust, tremendous boost of peace and tranquility. Not to ignore the pain, the suffering coming from terrorism and all kinds of other anti-Semitism in the world, but in general, Jews are living a pretty good quality life in terms of the material physical things. Even the more poor of the Jewish people are living, Baruch Hashem. We're not living in the levels of poverty that we lived for thousands of years. But throughout the history, there were rich Jews, but most of the Jewish people did live with tremendous deficiency in material things. So if that's the case, you ask the question, didn't Yitzchak bless Yaakov in the blessings Vayitan Lecha, in which Yitzchak blesses Yaakov? He gives him all the blessings of the world. Why hasn't it been fulfilled? Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz says an interesting thing. He says, since Yaakov is an Ishtam, since Yaakov is a wholesome person, and his midas emes, he's the attribute, he's the element of truth, since the way he received those blessings was through a deception, him dressing himself like Esav, so it did not come to him through his attribute of truth. There was something there in a manner that's not truth, so that's why the blessing never took firm hold in Yaakov. And we'll see in a moment why Esav did get it. Even though he lost the blessing, Esav still was blessed with those blessings. But Yaakov not. It says, even though, not to say, God forbid, there's none of that blessing being fulfilled, but it's not in the fullest you would expect, if you're reading the blessings that Yaakov got from Esav, that the Jewish people would have lived, all the Jewish people would have lived a wealthy, in total and complete affluence throughout our entire history. And that was not the case. And he says, the truth is, he says, I'm going to answer a question that the Abarbanel asks. He says, in general, we can ask the question, how did Yitzchak's blessing even supposed to work for Yaakov in the first place, he says. When Yaakov received it with Yitzchak's, it was through a deception. Yitzchak was not intending to bless him in the first place. So basically, what's the value of blessings that you're receiving, which is a mistaken blessing? In other words, does it truly have, what's the blessing? The blessing is that blessing is a spiritual thing. It's not, we're not dealing over here with giving, he didn't give him, a stash of cash. He gave him a spiritual blessing. It's a spiritual blessing, there has to be truth to it. If it wasn't intended to him, how is the blessing going to be there in the first place? That's the question that our Barbanel. What good is blessings that are coming through deception? But he says that question will be answered by the question going on the opposite. How was it that Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav in the first place? Esav was a wicked person. So why would Esav be the recipient of such blessings? In other words, the question we're asking now is, if Yaakov, it's a question on both ends. On Yaakov, the question is, how will these blessings even have any power or any potency for Yaakov if these blessings were never meant for him? Secondly, he says, we'll ask the question the opposite. Why would Yitzchak even want to bless Esav? How can it be, in other words, the way Yitzchak planned it, how can it be that Esav should be the recipient for blessings that he doesn't deserve? So the answer he gives is very, very interesting. He says Esav was a two-faced person. Internally, he was thoroughly rotten. Externally, he portrayed himself as a pious person. That's the idea of one of the Pirushim of the words Kitzayed Bepiv. He had later there's a verse that says that Yitzchak loved Esav because Esav was Tzayed Bepiv. Tzayed Bepiv means he hunted with his mouth, but the Rashi says he was able to deceive people with his mouth. So externally he presented himself as a tzaddik. Internally, he was a wicked person. That's why we know he's compared to the pig. The pig sticks out its legs outward to show itself as a kosher animal. But it's not, because it tries to say that, look, I have split hooves, but it doesn't chew its cud, meaning the more internal sign it doesn't have. So therefore he says an amazing thing. When Yitzchak gave the blessings to Esav, and Esav can have an argument, and Esav can have a complaint and say, listen here, these blessings were stolen from me, it's really my blessing, and therefore the blessing shouldn't have any potency, because internally Yitzchak did not consent to the blessings to Yaakov. So he says, but that will be a faulty argument on Esav's end, because the entire reason Esav deserved the blessing, to say that that Esav on his end should receive the blessing, is only from the external, because externally he behaved like a tzaddik. So basically the answer to Esav is either way. If you consider the external, if you're living in the world of the actual, not on the act of intentions, but you're living in the world of the actual, and therefore you're arguing that you deserved the blessing, because at least on the external level, you're behaving, or at least pretending to be a righteous person. So then Yaakov got the blessing, because on the actual literal level, Yitzchak's mouth, the physical blessings, were given to Yaakov. He actually blessed him. He gave him those blessings. If you're going to argue that those blessings are invalid, and the reason they're invalid was because Yitzchak was not intending it to go to Yaakov, which means we're not going to follow the actual verb, the actual, words that were used or said, but we're going to consider more the intentions, what was going on the inside. Then, if we're going to work in the world of intention, Esav in that realm doesn't deserve the blessings at all, because internally he's completely rotten. So Yitzchak would have never had given him the blessings. So either way, and then it should have gone to Yaakov. So either way, Yaakov deserves the blessings, not Esav. If we're dealing in the world of, on the outside, on the surface, Yitzchak gave the blessings to Yaakov. That's what he said. If we're dealing with intentions, and you'll argue that Yaakov he didn't intend them, well, had he known what's happening in the inner world of Esav, he would have never intended it to Esav. And that is the reason why he says how one question answers the other. But this will also explain why in the end the Esav does receive this world, the blessings of the material. Esav receives the blessings of the material, at least for the time being, is because when Yaakov took those blessings, he didn't take it in truth, because he took it with some kind of a deception. So for that reason, Esav also gets, Esav gets part of this world. He says, but what Esav gets this world, which this world by its very nature is a world of deception. Because as we said earlier from Rabbeinu Bechaya, the pleasures of the world, they offer themselves up to a person that they're going to lead a person to happiness, but they don't bring happiness. If we use the physical world for higher purposes, then we feel a sense of content and a sense of happiness with the worldly blessings. But if you take the worldly blessings and divorce it from anything godly or anything spiritual, it on its own leaves a person aching. So for that reason, since the whole thing was Esav is a man of deception, he gets a world that is full of deception. That's his realm. But then he concludes with something really interesting. He says, since after everything is said and done, Yaakov's partial hold on the material world came to him through a deception, through him deceiving Esav. And that's a blemish on Yaakov's end. Now, again, he listened to his mother. His mother told him to do that. But after everything he still used some kind of a fraud, some kind of a cunning and a fraud in order to get those blessings. There needs to be a rectification. And who rectifies Yaakov? His very special wife, Rachel. Rachel also used the same kind of deception like Yaakov. But she used that deception in a good way. When was that? When her sister Leah went in her place into Yaakov's bedroom the first night of their marriage. So we know that Yaakov had made signs with Rachel, and he told her that he knew that Lavan, his father-in-law, is a cheat, a con artist, had the ability to deceive him, and he knew that that in the dark he might send his sister in his place, so he made certain signs with her. But then when Lavan did that, and Rachel realized that Leah would be busted, and would be called for her fraud, and that would be a horrible embarrassment on the night of her wedding. So she went and she hid, listen, amazing, she hid under the bed with her groom. She didn't even realize how ultimate act of sacrifice, of selflessness. She thought she's going to forfeit now her husband that she's been waiting for her entire life, her love, all of her aspirations. Instead, she's giving it away to her sister, who's receiving and taking away her groom through deception. And yet Rachel went, and from under the bed, she answered the question, so Yaakov should be able to hear her voice. She thought it's coming from Leah, and he thought it's coming from Leah. So here, deception was used in the ultimate selflessness. So this was a tikkun for Yaakov using deception for what you can call to get something. Rachel used deception to forfeit something that she really wanted. And that's why she made a tikkun in the world of Yaakov. And as a result of that, that enables now Yaakov to receive the blessings rightfully, because that blemish of the deception goes away. And where do we see that is in the merit of Rachel? It's an amazing thing. It says, Esav will not fall. The fall of Esav will be dafka through the descendants of Rachel. That's what it says. In other words, the descendants of Leah don't have any power over Esav. Descendants of Rachel. The pasuk says, "V'hoya beis Esav lakash." The house of Esav will be straw. What's straw? Straw is also the same idea. It looks like it's a whole big, immense amount of something. It looks big and important, but all that it is just chaff. It's just external. It's nothing. And what is going to happen? The pasuk says, "Ubeis Yaakov, ubeis Yosef lahava," and the house of Yaakov is going to be fire, but the house of Joseph is going to be lahava. Is going to be a big flame. It's the flames of Joseph, the flame of Yosef HaTzadik, that will burn down the entire house of Esav. What does you need the power of Yosef? Because that Yaakov will be able to take back the world from Esav and turn our world into the Olam Habo world, which is the world of Yaakov, and take it back from Esav. It needed the power of Rachel, because we needed that tikkun to be done in Yaakov's realm, because Yaakov has some kind of a blemish. This is what the great Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz says. I find that to be very, very, very fascinating. I would have wanted to, let's do this quickly, to add the Chassidic dimension to all of this. So the Tzemach Tzedek explains that the reason why Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav, he was an ish sadeh, a man of the field, was because Yitzchak saw things the way they truly, truly, truly are. And ultimately, we know that it's the correction of the physical material world that reaches the highest pleasure and draws down the greatest divine energies. He says it's similar to the idea of Zvulun and Yisachar. Zvulun are the Jews that are businessmen. Yisachar are the Torah scholars. And the pasuk puts Zvulun before Yisachar, even though Yisachar learns Torah. Zvulun are those who support him. So it's because, the Gemara says, is because the study of the Torah study of Yisachar is enabled by his brother Zvulun, who are the supporters of Torah. But the Chassidic masters, in Chassidism, we take this to a whole new level. And the explanation to this is that it's not just because they're supporting the Torah, and if not for them it couldn't work, but because spiritually it's business people that venture out into the world, into the field, and over there are sparks of holiness. And we know that these sparks of holiness are coming from a world that is even higher than the Torah. The Torah is coming from a level of holiness called the power of Chachma. Koyach Ma, the power of 45. It's one of the names of God. It's the name of Hashem that dominates the world of Tikkun. It's the Koyach Ma, the power of wisdom. But higher than the world of Tikkun is the world of Toyu, is where the energy of God was unrestrained and unfiltered. But that world could not hold, and it collapsed, and the shattered vessels of that world fell down, and they became embedded in Klippa, and that's the world that needs correction. So here we come to a very interesting thing. The fallen shards of that spiritual, vast, godly world, as it falls down, the sparks of holiness creates the material, physical world with all of its, as we spoke, the world of deception and all the darkness, sense of disconnect and separation from Hashem. This is related to another name of God called Shem Ban, the name of 52. When we measure these two realms, the realm of Chachma, which is the realm of Koyach of Ma, versus the power of Ban, Ma is much higher than Ban. Ma is much closer to God, and Ban is little sparks that are far away. They're also godly, but it's far inferior to the power of Ma. But that's only before we rectify the sparks. When we, however, measure up these fallen sparks after we rectify them and bring them back to the place where they fell from, they come from even a higher realm called Shem Samach Gimel. Anybody that wants a discussion, an explanation on all of this, last week, Thursday night, I gave a class called Biur Ani Ledodi V'Dodi Li. So in that Maimer Lakuti Torah, we discussed mamash this idea, that the fallen sparks of Ban, from the name of 52, when it is rectified and brought back up to their spiritual source, it's elevated to the name of 63, which is another name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. These are all Kabbalistic ideas of the Arizal, which 63 is higher than a 45. So it comes out like this. The material world, before it's fixed, is much lower than the scholar's world, the world of Torah, the world of holiness. But after these sparks are elevated to their source, they reach higher and greater. And that's why when we measure up Torah and mitzvahs, on the one hand we say Torah is greater. Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Torah is chachma, koach ma. Mitzvahs are all relating to doing a mitzvah with a physical object. So in general we say Torah study is higher than mitzvah. When a person has a choice to learn Torah, do a mitzvah, if there are other people that can do the mitzvah, you're supposed to give up the opportunity to do the mitzvah and study Torah, because Torah connects you to God on a higher level. That's, however, the mitzvah in its current state. But after the mitzvahs will be elevated to their source, meaning after we do the mitzvah, and especially when Moshiach comes, when the entire material world will be reconnected and completely synchronized with its spiritual source where it came from, which is the world of Tohu. And those lights of Tohu are going to now reconnect and rechannel into the physical objects of the physical world with which we did mitzvahs. And the name of Samach Gimel is going to reappear in our world. So then the powers of the material physical world are going to way supersede the power of Torah. And that's why Zevulun is higher than Yisachar. That's why the sages also say, when they ask the question, which one is greater, Talmud Gadol or Maisa Gadol? Is Talmud greater or Maisa is greater? The sages say Talmud is greater because it brings to Maisa. But ultimately Maisa, which is action, which is the name of 52, Shem Ban, that's really higher than the world of Talmud. It really rises. And that's why when Mashiach comes, Maisa is going to be greater than Talmud. And therefore he also says that's the idea also where, the world of Maisa, of action, is related to the power of Malchus. These are vast Chassidic ideas, which I don't have the time now, and it's not the place to explain them in great detail. I'm assuming that those that are listening have some knowledge in this idea, so I'm just referencing it. And we give many other classes in which these ideas are elaborated. But just in Bekitzer, that Tzemach Tzedek says, really, really amazing, this level of Ban, which is the fallen sparks, is related to the world of Malchus, which is also called Bas. She's the daughter, because in the realms, in the divine configurations, Chachma is called father, Bina is called mother, 6 emotions are called son, and Malchus is called daughter. Malchus is called Bas. When Mashiach comes, it says, Rani v'simchi Bas Tzion, that the daughter is going to sing and be joyous because Malchus is going to rise higher than all the other spheres, which means the appreciation of the rectification of the material, physical, lower things in the world are going to rise up to the highest, to their source, in which they're going to unleash the greatest godliness ever, dafka the physical things. That's why we also find that when Mashiach will come, and we're going to have all the tzaddikim line up, and we know that tzaddikim, especially the avos and so forth, our patriarchs, matriarchs, and so on and so forth, they all represent the various different powers of the divine, we know that the one that's going to supersede all the tzaddikim is going to be King David, Moshiach Tzedkenu, David HaMelech. That's why when it comes to benching Birkas HaMazon, we discussed this in the earlier Mashiach Matters classes, that David HaMelech is going to be given the benching. He's going to lift up the kais of Yayin HaMeshumar. He's going to bring down, because that kais shel bracha, that lifting of the cup, is the cup that brings down the ultimate infinite blessings, the blessings that are Ein Sof. And those blessings that are going to come, the kais shel bracha of Mashiach is like the cup that's going to contain all the blessings for the entire Mashiach era. Who's going to bring down the greatest blessing? It's not going to be Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which represent all the powers of Ma. Even the word Avram is if you take the word Avram and you rearrange the letters, you get the word Aver Ma, the channel of Ma energy. It's not Avram, it's not Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the Torah, who's Ma, or Yosef HaTzadik, who's one of the channels of this Ma energy. It's not that power. It's the power Dafka of David HaMelech. Because David is going to rise higher than all. And the words that he uses over here, which is, by the way, the same language we learned on Thursday night, the power of Ma is the power to make the tikkun. It's the power it's a power that's already connected to God. It's the power of tikkun that does, the power of chachma that does the tikkun. It says what's kosher, what's not kosher, how to use something in the physical world to serve God. What could be rectified, what's redeemable, what's not. That's the power of the one, the mashpia, that's doing the rectification. But then there is the object that's being rectified, the spark that's being rectified. So in the current state, the sparks of holiness are helpless. They can't help themselves. They're much lower in their godly capacity. So the power, the rectifier, the mavarer, is higher than the one that's being rectified. But after Mashiach comes, it will turn over. Those very sparks, the man, the power of the one that is being rectified, will rise higher than the power that rectified him. That's the idea that the feminine energy will be higher than the masculine light. The koach of the physical, the body will be higher than the soul. So Ban is going to be higher than Ma. And that's why David HaMelech is going to be greater than all the other tzaddikim that came before him. Now that we understand that idea, we'll understand why, just like in the Jewish people, there are these two madregas that Tzemach Tzedek says. Yaakov Avinu thought that, Yitzchak thought that Yaakov and Esav are the same two things. Yaakov, he knew, is the man of Chachma. Chachma is a very measured light. He says, interesting, he says that the power, one more idea, just very quickly. He says that the power of Tikkun, the koyach of Ma, is the power of the Mamalik Kalam, the indwelling light of God. It's the light of God that comes into vessels. That's why the vessels is able to contain it. And he says its shoresh is the kav, the thin little light of God, the measured light of Hashem. The power of the sparks of holiness that are fallen, come from the Soviv Kalam, come from the encompassing light that never made it into vessels, the infinite. So therefore, he says that, and the infinite light that's not in vessels is infinitely above the power of Chachma. So even though Yaakov is the power of Chachma, it says Beferish, Vayakom Eidos beYaakov, Hashem established Eidos, which is the Torah, in Yaakov. The Torah, some be Yisroel, and the Torah he placed in Israel. And Esav is a man of the field. But Esav he thought is the power of Maisa. That's why the word Esav is from the word Asiya, action. He thought that Esav's business, he's the mitzvah man. Yaakov is the Torah Jew. Esav is the mitzvah Jew. He's the Zvulun Jew. And the way we rectify all these sparks of Asiya is from mitzvahs maisiyas, is by physical mitzvahs. And from physical mitzvahs, you're reaching the Soviv Kalama, which is called Gadol. And he says that's why Esav is called B'nah HaGadol. He's the older son. And it's true. Esav's sparks are from that world of Toyu. And what do Chazal say about mitzvahs? We said before, Talmud Gadol or Maisa Gadol. And by Maisa we say Maisa is Gadol, because Dafka Asiya, action, touches the Gadol Hashem, touches the infinite. And Chazal also say by tzedakah, kol pruta, every tzedakah, every penny you give to tzedakah, which again is the act of physically elevating the physical currency, Mitztarefes lecheshbin godol, combines to a massive cheshbin, godol. It's infinite. And that's why Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav, because he wanted to give him special success in this work of Birur Hanitzutzis, in this work of rectifying sparks of holiness. Like we see the blessings of Birchas Kohanim, Yivarecha Hashem v'Yishmerecha, are physical blessings. Hashem shall bless you with money, with what? Why? Because dafke in this, when you have an abundance of the physical, then you can elevate a lot of sparks in the material world. And as he says, you see that dafke David HaMelech was given that. David, who represents more than material. By the way, I want to say, in the Jewish people in general, you find that there is the world that's more associated, that puts greater emphasis on Torah study. And then you have the Chassidic world, especially the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who put tremendous emphasis on getting Jews to do mitzvahs. He created these tremendous mitzvah campaigns. And to a lot of Jews who look at this, they look at it like external, superficial, come on, take people, learn with them Torah, give them knowledge. You grab Jews doing mitzvahs, it seems to be cheap. I'm saying literally. Some people look at it cheap. This is the lack of appreciation. It's messianic. You're right. During the whole Golus, the Jewish people valued Torah. Greater. We value both, but there was always a greater emphasis and value, appreciation for Torah, knowledge, and the like. But messianic in Moshiach is the power of David HaMelech, the power. That's why it's so connected to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, related to the power. The whole inyan of Chassidus is Malchus Beis David. It's all Maisa Gadol, doing mitzvah campaigns, getting another year to do a mitzvah. Millions and millions of mitzvahs, acts of holiness. And through people that are not Torah related, people that are very simple, just grab a Jew, do a mitzvah. It's all related to David HaMelech's world that's going to be greater when Mashiach comes, and he's going to bench of Maisa Gadol. It really began with the Baal Shem Tov, giving tremendous kiruv to the simple Jews, who are the mitzvah yidden. Because Baal Shem Tov relates already to the messianic process. And Yitaka find, he says, that this wasn't just a mistake on Yitzchak's part. You see, David and Esav, we spoke about this in another class, King David and Esav have a relationship, because King David is also red, just like Esav was red. He's also Admoni, he's red, but with beautiful eyes. We mentioned that last week from Rav Tzaddik as well. That's the tikkun. Or he says, one more idea, and then we're going to wrap it up. Or he says, it's possible that Yitzchak's intention in blessing Esav is not so much because of the sparks of holiness, but similar to that, not because of the sparks, which Esav, is, by being a man of the field, is going to be more involved with, and Yaakov is more a Torah Jew. But there's another idea, he says, is that there is two types of Jews serving Hashem. One are the tzaddikim, the saintly, and the other ones are the Bali Tshuva. Tzaddikim are those who are always doing things that are right, and that's Yaakov. Yaakov is a ish tam. He's a wholesome person, is a tzaddik. Esav, Yitzchak thought that Esav, his avod is going to be that he's coming from the field. Am tza'acho b'chutz, I find you outside. The Baal Tshuva is a man of the field. He's outside of holiness. His yearning for holiness and godliness is with an intensity that tzaddikim don't have. The Zohar says. A Baal Tshuva comes b'chela yatir, with added vigor and added energy and added intensity. And Yitzchak thought that Esav is going to be that Baal Tshuva. And he doesn't mean that he has to sin. He says Tshuva can be even not from sinning. It's just a person that's life is outside of holiness, has a greater yearning for Kedusha. And therefore, they draw down higher lights. Either way, he says Yitzchak in the end made a mistake. And the reason is, even though Esav is a man of a field, but since he is still part of the Klippa, he can't redeem himself. You need Torah to guide the elevation. You can't have mitzvah observance without Torah. You need the power of Torah as well. That's why. You can't compare Esav to Zvulun. Zvulun is a Jew, he says. And every single Yid be'etzem has Torah in his neshama. And every single Yid is a spark from Olam of Tikkun, from the world of Tikkun. So he says, therefore, a Yid be'etzem has the Koach Ma inside of him. So even if most of his life he's dealing more with the outside world, but he has that bittul, that tnuah, that Torah inside of him. He's connected to that realm. He says he brings it from the idea of Eloy Ama Oretz Chassid. You can't have piety if you're an ignorant person. Without the Torah, it doesn't work. So just to have a Yisachar just to have Zavulun without Yisachar doesn't work. Esav would have been just a Zavulun without Yisachar, without that whole power. He says, and that doesn't work. He says, a Jew, his neshama comes from the 10 spheres of Kedusha. Even the lowest Jew, Jews that are in the world of Asiya, from that Esav realm of Asiya, of action. Still, he has a nitzutz of bittul in his neshama, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Perik Yud Ches and Tanya, that even the Jews that come from the most external world of Asiya still have that nekud of Chachma. And therefore they have the bittul, and therefore they can do a rectification. Esav himself, true, when Esav is rehabilitated, he's the highest of the high, but he can't rehabilitate himself. He can't fix himself. He needs the power of Yaakov to do his bittul for him. And that's why Yaakov needed to come and take his blessings and dressed like Esav, meaning helping his brother Esav out. But it has to come from the world of Yaakov. It can't come through Esav himself. That's the general idea. Because Klippa doesn't have any das, they don't have any pnimius, they're not able to bring that godly awareness that it takes in order to be able to elevate a spark of holiness. May we merit to see already the complete unification of Yaakov and Esav, where Esav is reconnected to his source, draws down this great, great godly potential. But we should recognize and underappreciate the tremendous heroism of Yaakov Avinu. And not only did he take his role on of learning Torah, but he actually also entered into Esav's domain to help his brother Esav in this rectification. May we merit to see Moshiach takef umiyad now. Next week, Thursday, I will not give a class. Baruch Hashem, in the middle, going to be middle of the Sheva Brachas of my daughter. We're going to be out of town. And Bezrat Hashem, tune back in 2 weeks from now, Thursday. Thank you.